Alright, in this lesson here, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at decorations, or what is also known as deco layers. Go ahead and take it away, Logan.
Well, decorations it's the process of taking a static mesh and having it distributed or scattered across your surface. This is an interesting way of adding like weeds or grass to a terrain. And to do this, we'll simply go over to the Decorations tab, and we need to create a new deco layer. So I'll go ahead and hit New. Now, we've got a deco layer, but there's obviously some stuff we're going to need to set up. There's no static mesh that we're going to be scattering across the surface, and it doesn't know how to place it. Now, basically, the placement of the static mesh across the surface is based on yet another map. It's called the density map. It takes yet another grayscale, or the alpha of an RGB A8 texture, and uses the values in that grayscale or alpha to decide where your static mesh should be placed. So first, let's go ahead and just assign this a static mesh real quick so that it's set up. Let me grab static meshes, and let's see, how about we load tower static and switch on over to rock, and from rock we have tree shrub, nice little tumbleweed that's not tumbling looking mesh. Now, that's the mesh we want to use, and it's assigning it to this deco layer is as simple as right-clicking and saying set static mesh from current, and then now shows which static mesh is going to be used. Now, we need a density map. We need to be able to tell where we want these meshes to exist. Now, we could bring in any form of grayscale map we wanted to use, but since we already have the ability to paint on layers, you saw in a few lessons ago how we could easily assign or easily edit the alpha or grayscale of a layer. What we can do is we can actually use a layer's alpha for the density of a deco layer, meaning that we would have the ability to paint where we wanted our decorations to appear, which is very nice, very quick, and very handy. In order to do that, we'll create a new layer, and then we'll assign it to the base, so it'll never actually be seen texture-wise. It'll only be used for the alpha for the decorations density map. So go ahead and click on an undefined slot, and let me make sure I have a texture selected, even though the texture is kind of irrelevant, it's not going to be seen. Go ahead and hit New, stick with my level, and I'll call this one Deco Layer 1, with less Y's and more R's. Now the alpha fill, I'm going to go ahead and let it start out as black or completely transparent, so there will be initially the decoration won't appear anywhere. That way I can start and specify where. If we had made that white, it would appear everywhere on the mesh, and we'd have to kill it out from where we didn't want it. So I'll simply start with transparent and work our way up where we want decorations. The U and V scale are pretty much irrelevant, since the only information we're interested in is the grayscale itself for the density map. So deco layer 1, go ahead and hit OK. Now, I want to go ahead and make sure I move this all the way back to the base so that everything else is applied above the deco layer, since we're only using its information over in the Decorations tab. Now, to go ahead and set this all up, I'll just right-click and say Set Density from Current Texture, but just to make sure it really is the current texture, and a good point, as we showed before, the actual height map, if you go over to the My Level package, My Level, and we've got some of the various maps and layers we've been using. If we scroll down, we should find Hunting, Deco Layer 1. With that actually selected as a texture, we can go into the Decorations tab, then Set Density from Current. So we're using the alpha from this texture for our density map. And the reason we've set it up like this is, of course, so we can use layers and paint on deco layer to paint these shrubs we selected into existence. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select this, and I'm going to, what will look like, start painting. I'll grab a little bit of radius, set the strength all the way up so I have a little bit of brush. So now I've got layers selected. And it's also important to note that if you're using a layer to define a height map and you paint on that layer to, in effect, paint your decoration, make sure you actually are on the Layers tab and painting on the desired layer, not painting on the Decorations tab. This can cause problems. So with this layer selected, let me just paint out in this open area a little bit. But notice that as I paint, nothing really happens. I mean, it may affect the shadow maps a little bit, but we don't see any meshes at all. There is a very key setting that must be set first. Decorations have a visibility radius, meaning that if they're too far away, they won't draw. This, of course, saves on speed when you're playing the game. those values default to 0, so they don't show at all. We need to go ahead and edit some of the terrain info's properties before we can continue, so we can actually we'll set up a visible range so that we can see the mesh as we paint. I can actually leave terrain editing selected. I'll use the find actors and search for the terrain info, double click to select it. Then I can bring up its properties. And I need to hunt down that deco layer. So under terrain info, and we'll actually be going over some more of these properties just to show some of the basically the hidden stuff that terrain is able to do, some interesting properties that add a little bit more power to working with terrain. Anyway, back on topic, deco layers. And since in the decorations tab we added a deco layer, we have an element in the deco layers array. Expand that, and we have a whole bunch of properties. Well, again, we'll look at a few of these more in just a minute. But first, fade out radius. This is what I was talking about, where a certain decoration is only visible within a certain radius, and outside of that radius it starts to fade off. What minimal will do is anything within the minimum radius is completely visible, and once it fades towards the max radius, it gets more transparent and finally fades out completely. I want to set this quite high just because this is more of a demo map and we're not too worried about performance. You'll want to play with this a little bit to make sure that the decoration isn't too heavy on gameplay if you're making an actual playable map. So for the minimum, I'll set this all the way up to, say, 4,000 and set the max to 6,000. Alright, with those set, now if I move a few of these tools out of the way, move my view around, and remember where I painted? Look at that, shrubs, bushes. And again, with the deco layer selected, painting still selected, I can control left and actually go and paint these wherever I want them. So paint a little bit over here, and there we go, where we can paint decorations wherever we want. And again, I can set the strength down and not paint so harshly. And we'll actually get into other ways of controlling some of the thickness of these of the deco layer itself. But that's the basics of creating and placing pieces in a deco layer. Now we're going to go just a little bit further and take a look at the color and scale maps. First, the color map. You'll notice that as these static meshes are getting placed, they're using their default texture color. Nothing else is overriding their color or adding to it. And you actually have an extra layer of control that allows you to take a color map and assign it to this deco layer and add an extra level of color to these static meshes. Here's what I'm talking about. I'll go ahead and bring in a new texture, just a very basic. I'll turn generate maps off just because it shouldn't be noticeable, and maybe not necessarily here, but other parts of terrain generation can actually cause problems. Let me just pull this in. CMap 3 should be fine. And with that, I'll simply grab that color map because I want to try and impose these colors over the static mesh. So I'll simply right-click and say Get Color Texture from Current. And let's see, I might have to either rebuild or re-grab the map. It all depends on how it was set up. If I was to rebuild, let's see, if it doesn't immediately grab the map, you can always try opening up the actual default properties of the terrain info back under deco layers, and under the color map, clear it out and maybe hit use current, and that will force it to grab that texture. And now you notice over here, and the way this works is since this is a 128 by 128 texture, it's only displaying this large because under view we had 256 by 256, lowering that down, and there's the actual size. Now, if you remember, all our height and alphas are also 128 by 128, meaning that we start at what looks like blue at this edge and then work our way over the green stripe. And so on this side of the map, if we were to go back to layers, deco layer, so we could paint on it some more, you'll notice the shrubs over there are sort of reddish colored. So it's just an extra way of putting color over it. Obviously, you probably wouldn't use just primary colors, but it's kind of nice to be able to specify that some meshes in a certain area take on a different color. And one last thing to point out is the fact that if you're using a color map, it has to be an RGB A8, otherwise the color will be black. And it's also helpful to make sure that the dimensions line up with the current the height map size, so that it's very easy to tell. Let me see if I can zoom out just a little bit. Where we have blue, so blue stripe, we work more over towards the middle of the terrain, middle stripe, work over to the far side, the red stripe. So that's the basics of grabbing a color map to add some extra color to your deco layer. Now, finally, we have the ability to use a color map to specify individual scaling. Well, not individual to mesh, but individual to an area type scaling. And this is a little bit interesting. The way this scaling works is it takes the color value, red, green, or blue, and uses that to define an X, Y, or Z scale. So if we were to go real quick and grab and set the scale texture from current, and again, if it doesn't want to take immediately, you can always just load up the train info itself under Deco Layers, under Scale Map, Clear and Use, and just to force it to take. Now, take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. Let me go back over to those red shrubs, and notice how they're all kind of thin and pointing up and down that way. If I was to scroll all the way back over, and the green ones are basically aligned in the Y direction, and the blue ones are scaled up in Z. So it's taking the color information and applying it to this Deco layer as scale information. Now, to be really useful, I mean, you wouldn't even necessarily use all the colors all at the same time. For example, you could keep your red and green colors or levels the same throughout, and simply vary the amount of blue, and then you would be varying the Y scale. So if you wanted very accurate control over the Y scale of your Deco layer, it's not really that hard to do. Just bring in a map that has varying blue colors, blue for Z, and you can specify Z scale for areas of your Deco layer. Now, let's see, with that, that's pretty much the basics of setting up a Deco layer and applying not only an editable density map through layers, but also adding color on top of the static mesh and scaling it with a color map. Now, you have similar controls to layers. You can duplicate or delete. So if you wanted, say for example, if you wanted a set of trees, I mean, we could go. If you wanted some grass, let's see, we could. Let's go ahead and we can duplicate this one, or we'll go create a new one. And this one, let's see, we might need to create a new layer for the density. So let me go ahead and grab new, and let's see, Deco layer 2. So I'll put some grass or trees on this one. And again, start off transparent. And the final Deco layer, let me scroll down a little bit and grab. Okay, where did I put that? Okay, there. Okay, Deco layer 2. I had the right one selected. So both Deco layers are below what we're actually using for texture information. Now with Deco layer 2, let me go find that real quick. So hunting Deco layer 2. Let's set the density from the current texture. So now we can paint on Deco layer 2 to specify grass. Of course, no static mesh yet. So we'll go and grab static meshes and let us find a nice grass as I hunt around a little bit. So a little bit of grass. Let's get the current static mesh from current. And now, again, using the painting on this layer, I should be able to paint a little bit. Again, the same thing with I have to be able to set the view range. So let me go ahead and bring up the properties. I still have the train info selected. Deco layers, you see we have that second Deco layer in element 1. Hunt down, go find the fade out radius, and fade out radius for, or was it, did it get switched around? Right, it got added in above, so we're actually, 0 is actually the second one, the grass layer, if you will. Fade out radius, here we go, 0. Let's up this to 4,000. And then fade out after 6,000, be completely invisible. And now, grass. So you can see, you can have as many Deco layers as you want. Just keep in mind that you don't want to go too crazy with this for performance reasons. But we can go in there and paint some grass in between. So there we've got multiple Deco layers. And again, we could take this grass layer and start assigning specific color or scale to it if we wanted to. And go and bring up the display of which Deco layers to show. So we can very easily show and hide individual ones, or completely hide all of them if you want to go back to basic train editing without the Deco layer in the way. I'm going to turn them all back on. So that's basic Deco layer editing.
All right, very cool, very powerful. So that's going to conclude this lesson. Thanks.